developing. With that, we'll go ahead and get started. So the outline for today's seminar is we'll cover kind of open with the importance of China to Western U.S. agriculture and give you a lay of the land on where the opportunities are and some of the macroeconomic trends that are taking place in China, especially among the demographics. Next, I'll cover an import market landscape from a technical perspective and the various requirements that you must comply with, specifically the GACC registration, which is the Chinese requirement now for exporters to comply with. And I'll explain the process and the compliance procedures there. And then afterwards, I'll hand it off to Ian Chen from SMH International Consulting to provide a case study and some more specific market opportunities within various sectors, and then market entry strategy. And then we'll wrap up with any Q&A and next steps. So starting out with the demographic overview, Ian will cover this later as well, but just to highlight some major trends among the demographic and shifts in the population. There is aging pressure in China. So nearly 20% of Chinese citizens are over the age of 60, and that's projected to double by 2050. This is putting a strain on their pension program, healthcare, and their workforce stability. They also have low youth representation, so only 17% of the population is under 15, which is reflecting persistent low birth rates over time and a shrinking youth base, which eventually will have a strain on their workforce and GDP output. There's longer female life expectancy. So women dominate older age groups. Over 60% of those over 80 years old are female, and the gap is widening sharply past 90. So that has an impact on shopping and food consumption trends as well. So in terms of demographic challenges ahead, after 3 years of population decline, China faces a shrinking workforce, growing elderly population, which is pressuring the economy and social systems despite policy efforts. The economic indicators, kind of overall how that's influencing the economy and GDP growth. You'll see in this chart that the real GDP growth has slowed. It's from a high-speed growth rate to a steady 3 to 5%, and that reflects again a maturing economy with more sustained but selective demand for high-quality imports. Their post-pandemic recovery has been slower than other Asian economies, coupled with domestic headwinds like real estate troubles, high youth unemployment, and it's made Chinese consumers more cautious, which driving demand toward trusted, safe, premium U.S. products as an opportunity for U.S. companies. The middle class is expanding. Despite the overall slower growth, China's expanding middle class continues to drive strong interest in premium, organic, and sustainable food and agricultural imports. And the lower growth will increase competition. As China's GDP growth moderates to 3 to 4% through 2030, competition will intensify for slower growing consumer base, making strong branding, differentiation, and distributor relationships increasingly important for U.S. exporters. Now moving on to the technical landscape when exporting to China. I'll go over the current tariff situation and the trade agreements in place or in progress. There's key technical barriers such as MRLs, phytosanitary certificate requirements, and labeling and documentation requirements. And then also the regulations for non-commercial shipments and gifts. So the current tariff situation, we have a timeline here. So this all really started, at least for this current administration's tariff policy and changes in February. So on February 1st, Trump increased tariffs on China by 10%. And then a few days later, China retaliated with 10% tariffs on oil, agricultural machinery, and cars. Then on March 3rd, the Trump administration increased tariffs by another 10%, and the next day China retaliated with tariffs up to 15% on US farm goods. By April 2nd, Trump announced a 10% universal reciprocal tariff on all imports, in addition to a 34% tariff levied on China, which was later postponed. On April 5th, the 10% tariff took effect. And then on the 9th, the U.S. Effective tariff rate on China was 145%, and the Chinese effective tariff rate on U.S. was 125%. By May 2nd, the U.S. ended the de minimis exemption, which was on Chinese low-value imports are now fully taxed. And by May 12th, after negotiations, the U.S. lowered the tariffs from 145% to 30%. And then China lowered tariffs from 125% to 10% for both for 90 days. So as of June 10th, there's continued negotiations. The continued negotiations concluded. The U.S. tariff rate on Chinese goods were set at 55%, which is at 10% plus 20% fentanyl tariff plus 25% Section 301 tariff, and China maintained a 10% tariff on U.S. goods. Was that hopefully that wasn't too challenging to follow, but where we're at now is the 55% tariff on Chinese products and 10% on tariffs on U.S. goods. In terms of phytosanitary requirements, a phytosanitary certificate is required for all fresh fruits, vegetables, grains, and other regulated plant products. There are bilateral protocols. They were intended for specific commodities and are subject to specific U.S.-China agreements. They apply to apples, cherries, and hay, for example. There are pest-free areas. Exporters must demonstrate production areas are pest-free or are monitored under pest control programs within these areas. And the treatment requirements, China may require fumigation, cold treatment, or irradiation on certain agreements. In terms of labeling and documentation, in terms of language and labeling, labels must be in simplified Chinese. Bilingual formats are allowed if Chinese text is prominent, and translations must be accurate and follow Chinese standard formatting agreements. In terms of genetic engineering labeling, China requires labeling for genetically modified foods if there is GE content and it exceeds the limits established by the Chinese standard. Non-GMO claims face strict scrutiny and are only allowed if fully compliant. In terms of allergens, the GB 7718/2025 makes allergen labeling mandatory for major allergens such as gluten, peanuts, soy, and tree nuts on processed agri-products with clear formatting, must be bold or underlined. In terms of date marking, they must include production and expiration dates in the year, month, date format. And for items with shelf life over 6 months, the expiration date suffices. Nutrition information, if nutrition labeling is required, such as for packaged or processed ag goods, panels must include energy, protein, fat, carbs, and sodium. Additionally, sugar and saturated fat will start to be required this year. Country of origin. Imported ag products must clearly declare country of origin. If processing happens elsewhere, that country must also be listed. MRLs, so maximum residue. This applies to pesticides as well as veterinary drugs and food. They're governed by GB 2763 for MRL standards, and a national MRL standard for pesticides, and GB 2763 is the national MRL standard for pesticides, and GB 31650 is list MRLs for veterinary drugs and food. They are enforced by the General Administration of Customs of the People's Republic of China, which is GACC, and the Ministry of Agricultural and Rural Affairs, or MARA. China implements a zero tolerance approach. This is very important to keep in mind. And if no MRL exists, any trace of that residue will result in non-compliance. Shipments not in compliance with Chinese MRLs are rejected at port. subject to destruction or re-export, and publicly listed on the GACC's monthly non-compliance list. Key problem areas. So this is where challenges and exporters can face challenges when exporting to China. If there are unharmonized pesticides or in pre versus post-harvest treatments, trace residues from the U.S. are allowed, post-harvest fumigants can trigger non-compliance. So please keep in mind your pre versus post-harvest treatments and those residues and whether or not they would be detected. And then also veterinary drug residue that reiterates the importance of compliance to GB 31-650, which is the MRLs for veterinary drugs and food. Regulations for non-commercial shipments and gifts. So there are 3 categories: general gifts, cross-border e-commerce, and those above the threshold. There are value limits for under 800 yen, the 110 USD equivalent, and that is duty-free if declared properly. And following with up to 5,000 RBM per item, subject to e-commerce tax rates. For cross-border e-commerce and above the threshold or repeated shipments, they may be reclassified as commercial and taxed accordingly. Customs and clearance rules. The recipient must be an individual, not a company. GACC may open and inspect packages. And label must be clear and include the following: description, quantity, estimated value, and declared purpose. The prohibited gift items are meats, fresh produce, seeds, animal origin products, and high-risk ag foods. Next, I'll cover the registration process and compliance, including who needs to register and registration tips and common mistakes. So any foreign facility that manufactures, processes, or stores food products for export to China must register with the GACC. It applies to packaged and bulk food, includes warehouses, processors, and cold storage facilities, as well as includes cosmetics, feed, and non-food products exempted are cosmetics, feed, and non-food products. China requires that 18 high-risk food categories must register through the USDA or FDA. And these include meat and meat products, casing products, aquatic products, dairy products, birds' nests, bee products, egg and egg products, edible fats and oils, stuffed pasta, edible grains, malted grains, fresh and dehydrated vegetables, dried beans, spices, nuts and seeds, dried fruits, unroasted coffee and cocoa beans, special dietary foods, and health foods. Lower risk categories can self-register with GACC through their online system. Those include snacks and confectionery, bakery products, alcohol and beverages, and canned goods. Registration tips and common mistakes. It's very important to know your category. Are you high risk or low risk? If you're high risk, know the correct U.S. authority to register through. Register early. It could take weeks or months. Use consistent facility information. Information should match across all your documents. Maintain active registration and update your info within 60 days of changes. Renew whenever possible, when possible. And then track the GACC's China Import Food Enterprise Registration System, CIFER, for updates, registrations, and approval. Common mistakes: wrong product category. This can be a real big issue and lead to delays and rejections. Incomplete documentation, mismatched address information. So it should match the facility. The same address for this facility should match all documentation. Ignoring labeling requirements. Again, having that correct facility number which match the address is important, and assuming brokers handle the registration. It is the responsibility of the exporter for compliance and accuracy on that registration. So at this point, I'm going to hand it off to Ian Chen. Also, I know I covered a lot of information, a lot of technical information. Please feel free to put any questions you have in the chat. We have our team from our research unit at Bryant Christie online in this seminar, and they can, if possible, answer your questions you have through the chat, or we can address it during Q&A. We also offer one-on-one business consultations with our team, and you can sign up for a 30-minute session with Brian Christie, and we could answer specific questions for your business and product. So go ahead, feel free to put your questions in there. We'll answer them as to the best of our ability. But at this point, I will hand it off to Ian for a market study and more in-depth opportunities in China.
All right, thank you, Alicia. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone wherever you are. So happy to be here to kind of share our side of our insight. So without further ado, let's get into it, I guess. All right, so yeah, next slide, please. There you go. All right, so over the years, Chinese consumers have been able to access more and more products from other countries, but the US have maintained a pretty strong reputation, and demand for US products continues to be pretty robust. And from 2020 to 2023, China was the largest export destination for US agricultural products, mainly as a result of the Phase 1 agreement that was signed in 2020, which opened up market access for products like meat, feed ingredients, and pet food, amongst others. And today, China remains a top trade partner with the US, being the third largest importer in 2024 at $56 billion. Meat products, which are led by beef, pork, and poultry, and seafood as well, makes up a large part of what China imports. But tree nuts, dairy, wine, and pet food are also key imports for China. And when I mentioned the reputation of US products earlier, this is mostly referring to safety and quality aspects. And 72% of Chinese consumers said that they trust the safety of US food versus only 58% for food produced in China. And for the EU, the number is at 65%, which is still a little bit lower than the US. So although typically more expensive than other imports on the market, US products are still attractive options to Chinese consumers. And in fact, products imported from the USA on their packaging saw an increase in click-through rate on Tmall, which is one of the largest e-commerce platform in China, which we'll get into that later. But I also wanted to point out that even more popular with Chinese consumers is the original packaging that came directly from the US, because people find it more believable that this product is actually from the US rather than just a claim from a domestic brand with Chinese letters on it. So even if the product itself, the ingredients itself is from the US, but people will still gravitate towards packaging directly from the US. Next, please. So in China, imports are typically positioned as being premium, available in upscale retail stores and restaurants, but that position is starting to it's being challenged. First, by the decline in spending post-COVID. This is known in China as consumption downgrade in broad terms, but it really refers to wiser spending habits compared to the pre-pandemic levels. Plus, compared to global average, Chinese consumers are still more willing to spend. And on the other hand, China is also growing and producing more of its own premium products that usually came from overseas. So for example, China is increasing its production of caviar, foie gras, and macadamia. But whether consumers buy into that they are just as high quality as their foreign counterparts, that's another story. Now, the organic segment is another growing market in China that is building in size, worth about $14 billion in 2023. And the organic market is forecasted to grow at 9% over the next 5 years. The majority of organic products in China currently are from domestic brands, but the number of organic certifications issued to overseas products is also growing. Dairy is the largest category that is receiving Chinese organic certifications, and this is led by sterilized milk with around 3.7 billion certifications issued. And in the pie chart on the right side, we can see Ireland being by far the largest exporter of organic products to China. That is followed by Denmark, New Zealand, France, Finland, Australia, so on. The US has an extremely limited number of organic products certified by the Chinese, and USDA's organic is also not recognized in China. So unless the product is certified by the Chinese authorities, USDA organic products are not allowed to be marketed as organic in the marketplace. So they would have to cover up the logo of the USDA organic logo. Now, one trend that is also growing in China is sustainability, with the growing number of consumers understanding that sustainability being an important factor in food security, and half of Chinese consumers recognizing that sustainability benefits of meat and dairy alternatives. But plant-based products are still finding it a challenge, taking off in China, maybe because the country has been producing alternatives for meat and dairy for hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, with vegetarian dishes and soy milk, things like soy milk. So what is known today as alternative meat or dairy are viewed as a little bit too artificial, when more natural alternatives are already here. But anyway, consumers in China are still increasingly eco-conscious, and almost 70% of urban Chinese consumers said they're willing to pay 10 to 15% premium for eco-friendly packaging. But how does that translate to, in reality? I'm not sure, given that people are still looking for the best bang for their buck in today's economic environment. So we'll see about the eco-friendly packaging. Next, please. All right. But what is definitely for sure is that the e-commerce market in China is very, very, very big, and it is by far the world's largest e-commerce market, and it's been that way for 12 years and running. So China really benefits by the huge population that it has, with 1.1 billion internet users, as well as widespread internet penetration. The fact that China began developing much later than most first world Western countries means that they can build their infrastructure around online shopping, and the younger consumers had quickly adapted to shopping online over in-store shopping. And COVID was also a key accelerator in growing the e-commerce market, as the internet became maybe one of the few reliable ways people can actually shop for things during lockdowns and when the government was restricting movement. And older people who may have preferred to shop at wet markets or supermarkets before had also had to quickly learn how to shop online during that period. So, and many of them continued to adapt that habit post-COVID. So China is at the forefront of the e-commerce industry in the world, and this is led by the likes of Alibaba and its various platforms that include business to business, business to consumers, and consumer-to-consumer channels. It also has its own omni-channel retail chain called Fresh Hippo, whose retail format is now pretty much copied by retailers all around the country. And besides Alibaba, there's also JD.com, which is a very close competitor to them, as well as other alternative channels such as Pinduoduo, which is maybe for overseas, you guys might know it's a Temu in the international market. But overall, the traditional e-commerce market is showing a bit of signs of saturation with so much competition in what is essentially a price war. Consumers are no longer flocking to sales events that are organized by traditional platforms like Tmall or JD, which don't have the same pull as it was 3 to 4 years ago. And one of the reasons for that is the emergence of cross-border e-commerce, which became more and more popular just around 2018, 2019. So for some reason, cross-border e-commerce is where US products seem to thrive, as it is the second largest source of cross-border imports just behind Japan. One possible answer to this may be that in cross-border e-commerce, that first of all, import tariffs are waived for the consumer, and that US companies do not necessarily have to have an office or have a sales agent on the ground in China in order to sell. Instead, they can ship out of their warehouses in the US and to a bonded warehouse in China. And once the product is cleared by the customs, the consumers receives the product. This also means that the original packaging and labeling can be used. So this is beneficial to smaller companies that don't necessarily have the resources to produce lines specifically for the Chinese market yet. However, some may find the platform fees charged by the likes of Tmall Global or JD Worldwide, the two eminent platforms, to be too high for their liking, which could include a one-time deposit as high as $30,000 plus service fees that can cost up to several thousands a year on top of commissions on sales. So we've talked about traditional and cross-border e-commerce. A third channel that is more and more, we're seeing more and more Chinese consumers use to shop is through social media. It is playing a greater role in influencing purchasing decision because people are spending so much time on social media platforms like WeChat or TikTok or RedNote, that these platforms are becoming almost like a one-stop shop to research, peer reviews, and do the actual shopping. Many consumers, myself included, are shopping through live stream, which is kind of, well, acts like an online showroom with a salesperson telling you why you should buy their products. In fact, 34% of Chinese consumers said they find this type of sales more effective in stimulating purchasing. And for those who already have products in the market, working with a Chinese influencer can be a great way to promote your products and get quick results in sales. However, collaborating with the right influencers can be challenging because the high quality ones can be very expensive, and the ones that are more affordable can be a little bit all over the place when it comes to the quality of their content. So people are also becoming more and more overloaded by the constant information from social media and live stream that is becoming a bit more difficult to truly capture the attention from consumers. So, next, please. Thank you. All right, now let's talk a little bit about the food service industry. So the catering revenue in the first 10 months of 2024 recovered fairly well, growing by 5.9% from the same period from 2023. And online sales and food delivery remains a key component for many restaurants. And the online delivering service is one of the most competitive industries in China, and we're seeing more and more internal competition within that industry. As far as customer spending, 70% of food service merchants said they have an average customer spending of less than $15, which is a bit lower than pre-COVID times. So one of the reasons is because people are more focused on cost effectiveness when they're ordering food. And also one of the other key reasons is because consumption in first tier cities, which I'll cover later, is declining. But this is growing in lower tier cities. So what the government is doing is stimulating domestic tourism to try and help the industry in recovering from COVID. So, for example, there's snow tourism in Northeast China that created a lot of economic benefits to restaurants over in the region. And we're seeing interest in wellness and health boosted by consumption of meat as well as seafood. So one of the sector within the food service industry in China that we're seeing a lot of growth is the bakery sector, especially with imported ingredients being key to producing high quality baked goods and pastry products. So within the HRI sector in China, meats like beef, especially in pork, as well as seafood, as well as wine and spirits, that are very popular within the restaurant and hotel sector. And within the bakery sector, you have flours, butters, tree nuts, and also dried fruits that are highly in demand as well. All right, next, please. All right, and the next one, thank you. All right, let's talk about building relationships in China. This is going to be a critical factor if you want to be successful in selling to the country, because relationship, especially the term specifically called guanxi, can matter more than contracts than anything on paper. To understand what that is, it is by definition the close personal and network relationship that are usually established via personal introductions, networking events, or social activities. So if I'm close to someone who is a major buyer in China and I introduce you to him or her personally, or that you're chatting with a buyer at a post-event reception after meeting formally at a trade show or trade mission, and the two of you ended up adding each other on social media, etc. These type of relationships are known as guanxi. So through establishing this relationship, you can gain trust, reputation, and also sentimental affection, which can sometimes help open pathways and clear obstacles when something is on paper unlikely to happen. So the first thing in building and maintaining this relationship is to show that the other party that you're reliable and committed. So maintaining regular communication is essential. I will get into this a little bit more later, but like I said earlier, personal introductions or referrals from someone with influence is very effective in building that relationship. The Chinese culture, or in East Asia in general, is known for having many nonverbal cues, subtleties, and etiquettes that might be hard to grasp and can trip up a lot of foreigners. Chinese people are generally quite tolerant with foreigners when it comes to following these things, but if you're able to show that you respect and understand these cues and etiquette, that's points gained over other potential competitors. So if you get to the stage where you're invited to business dinners or banquets, that means you're you're getting closer to establishing the relationship and also more likely to getting a deal done at some point. So Chinese buyers usually don't invite people they have no intent of doing business with to dinners. So that is another good sign. Gift-giving culture is another way to show your business partner respect and also good wishes. The basics of gifting in China is that if your host gives you a gift, next time you'll bring something a little bit higher in value and as a return. Again, for foreigners, this might not be strictly required, but it is a display of goodwill and respect. And that goes a long way in doing successful business in China. Next, please. All right, so we talked about personal introductions just then as a great way to establish relationship, and USDA is one way to connect you with the right people in China. So how do we leverage that resource? So first of all, the USDA and their Foreign Agricultural Service has a large presence in China with several different branches playing various roles. There's the Office of Agricultural Affairs, which deals with more on the policy side of things. Then you have the Agricultural Trade Office, which is who we're going to be highlighting, as well as these two other agencies, APHIS and FSIS, which handles more on the inspection or certification side of things. Now for the Agricultural Trade Office, which we'll call it ATO from now on. So they have offices and staffs in 4 key cities in China covering different regions. And their role is to promote US-China agricultural trade, maintaining a network of trade and industry contacts, which we talked about just earlier being important. They also report on intelligence in the market and build consumer demand and positive awareness for US agricultural products. So they do this by publishing market reports, also known as gain reports, that cover various commodities and industries, and by supporting US companies by building presence at trade shows and also at trade missions, where they often provide market briefings into our participants and also referring buyers for companies to meet at the shows and missions. And on the side here is the contact information for all 4 ATO offices that you can reach out to if you need any advice or assistance. Next, please. Thank you. So China is a huge country, and most people may be aware of cities like Beijing or Shanghai. These are called first-tier cities, the most developed ones in the country, and they are either the economic, cultural, or political hubs of China. There are currently 4 cities ranked as first tier, and they combine for 78 million in population, with each one with over 10 million and as high as 24 million. Just to give you an idea, here's a comparison of the population of these 4 cities versus the entire state of Florida, New York, and Illinois. So these markets have more educated consumers with robust incomes that double the national average. But growth is slowing down in these cities as more people seek opportunities in emerging cities in what is known as second or third tier cities. There are currently 31 second tier cities, which are ranked based on criteria such as population size and income levels. And between 2019 and 2023, the average population growth in these markets are remarkably higher than first tier cities at 18% versus 1.7%. And within this list, there's 8 of them that are gaining ground faster than the others. And these are known as new first tier cities. Now, these markets, and to a small degree, third tier markets, are attractive to migrant workers from all over the country because they are not only witnessing faster growth economically, but also offer better work-life balance, which is important for younger people today. These markets offer a lot of potential for US products because not only income is growing there, but the acceptance and demand for imported food and drinks are also on the rise. Right now, larger brand names are the gateway for consumers over there to kind of get familiar with imported products, but at some point, I believe we'll start seeing more demand for smaller, novel brands and products by the consumers over there. For third tier cities, which sound much lower, but actually most of them still have a population of 1 to 5 million, might be the next frontier for US products. First of all, the limited presence and penetration of imported products might allow certain products to get first access to consumers over there who are also seeing an increase in income level. And when you couple that with their lower living cost, this means more disposable income to buy products that they're interested or curious to try. Next, please. All right, so what kind of tools or resources can we use to diversify to these markets? So first of all, there's WUSADA and its the export education, such as this webinar that we're having right now, and also other webinars that we've recorded in the past, covering various aspects of exporting to China. So these webinars are available on both the WUSADA website and also on YouTube. And then there's also the Global Connect program that includes trade show and trade missions to China. Trade shows is a great way to engage with large numbers of buyers from different parts of the country, learn about their feedback and on your products, and also connect with potential buyers. Trade missions, on the other hand, provides the opportunity to meet one-on-one with targeted buyers, usually from several first tier and second tier cities, over the course of a week or so, along with activities like market briefing by the ATO office and also market tours. So that way it allows you to have a more in-depth look into the Chinese market. And like I mentioned earlier, the USDA is a great resource to learn about the China market. So we have these offers and services from them that we can use as resources to diversify to the market. And next, please. All right. So for other ways to engage with the market, there are some options available in terms of virtual or hybrid activities. So for example, we are organizing a virtual inbound mission for food ingredients buyers later this year that could possibly expand it into an in-person mission to the US in 2026. So do keep an eye out on the WUSADA website if you're interested. There's also other trade shows that offer hybrid business opportunities. So for example, CL China's MatchMe service, which I can't really speak on too much because of the limited information available. But then there's also the China International Import Expo, or CIIE, which is another major trade show that offers hybrid matchmaking and online product exhibition. And last but not least, ATO China, as I mentioned earlier, they do organize activities like bakery training with US ingredients or product showcases that allows companies to expose their products to either consumers or to industry professionals. Next, please. All right, as for ways to maintain relationship with your business partners or potential buyers, once again, regular communication is key. Do check in with them time to time. Best way to do this is through WeChat. You can download it, get one, because almost, if not every Chinese person has a WeChat. So once you've added their contact, do send a text acknowledging that you've added them, sent over a digital business card, leave a few handshake emojis if you can. Once the conversation starts going, you can either do a voice or a video call with them so they actually hear your voice or see your face. Zoom or Teams are also now more commonly used as a tool for business meetings, but to the average Chinese traders, it is a bit too formal, I think. And WeChat is still the preferred channel for communication.
Zoom call is getting boring. I'm just. So.
I heard that. So once you've built a closer relationship, do invite them to your office,
Container storage.
or if you have a production facility, or do give them a tour. That is great in establishing trust in your company's reliability, quality, and also supply stability. So besides quality, Chinese buyers are most scared of overseas suppliers not being able to supply consistently, especially around Chinese New Year, which is when they start ordering around this time of the year, pretty much. But anyway, if your buyer or customer decides to come visit, do invite them to dinner to create closer and stronger personal bond. But still, it's still important for you to go visit them in China at some point to return the favor and show that you value the relationship. And whether you plan on traveling to China or not, learning a few simple Chinese phrases will absolutely help you gain points with your customer. Next, please. All right. So finally, here's a few tips on finding, vetting, and maintaining relationship with your distributor. So finding, well, attend trade shows and trade missions. If that's too much investment, you can check the exhibitors list on some of the major food and beverage trade shows, like the ones listed earlier. And you can also check, you can also connect with us, with Alicia and or the ATO for recommendations. And for vetting, besides leveraging resources like us or the ATO in the early stages, for a closer look, make in-person meetings with the distributor and maybe check out their offices or facilities, meet their sales and marketing team, and see if they really have the resources and dedication to help promote and sell your products to their end channels. So if it's retail products, go visit the stores they say they're supplying to see how competitive they are, or if any promotions are being done to their products, so you know how much effort they're putting into. And if the products are going to the food service channels, maybe go visit the hotels or restaurant and see if they're on the menu. For maintaining, once again, stay in touch, communicate regularly, learn what's working and what's not, and then work on developing a viable strategy together. If possible, offer sales or marketing support, whether it is by offering some sort of incentive or providing more background or information in your products, best selling points that can help maybe jumpstart the whole thing. And next, I believe that's the last thing I want to cover, which is IP protection and some of the current import regulations, which Alicia covered earlier, but I'll just go through it earlier as well. So if you have a trademarked product name, images, or logo, protect it as soon as possible by registering with the Chinese Trademark Office, because China has a first file policy when it comes to trademark registration. So once somebody has taken your trademark and trademarked it, it's a hassle to claim it back for yourself. And the process can take up to 18 months. So the earlier you can do it, the better. Just a quick note on contract and dispute resolution. Contracts with Chinese customers should be bilingual, and that the Chinese version of the contract would prevail in any disputes within China. So as for customs and import regulation, I guess I'm not going to go too deep into it, but Decree 248, which requires all overseas exporters to register with the Chinese Custom or GACC. We do have a webinar specifically on this topic from last November that you can check out on WUSADA's website. Labeling, I guess we already covered that. So, but just in case there's more details on USDA's gain reports that you can use to check and have the most updated information. And tariffs, as Alicia already mentioned earlier, the current situation seems to be okay, but many importers in China are still kind of in a speculation mode as of right now. But their sentiments toward importing from US is improving, so that is good news. And then there's also one more thing I want to point out is the tariff exclusion process that is available for Chinese importers who can apply for the exclusion. So even though this is only exclusively available to Chinese importers, it is still important for U.S. exporters to know about the process, as well as the current tariff rate on your products and how they might affect pricing. All right, so thank you very much. I think I've spent a little time on this, but yeah,
That's great, Ian. Thanks. With that, we'll hand it off to Nelda. I know we have just a few minutes left in the hour, but Nelda wanted to, we'll cover some upcoming events and open registrations to participate in.
Some upcoming Wasata events that some companies might already be registered for is the outbound trade mission to Tokyo, Osaka, and Sapporo, Japan, and that's coming up next month, July 20th through 26th. Then we also have the Japan outbound trade mission, which is consumer oriented, and that is coming up September 1st through the 6th. And then right now on the Wasata website, as well as there are open registrations that are active, and there's several on here. There's a Korea consumer-oriented outbound mission to Seoul and Busan. The event is in November, the 10th through the 14th, but the deadline is June 30th. So that is next week. China Pet Food International Fair Outbound Mission. The event, the activity is August 17th to the 24th, but the deadline is also, the deadline to register is also June the 30th. Alaskan Hawaii Floriculture Inbound Mission with in-market promotion. The activity is July the 27th through August the 2nd, with a deadline of July the 7th, so there's still some time. Latin America Produce Inbound Mission to Idaho and Nevada. The deadline for that is August the 4th. Then we have the Specialty Food Promotion in Western Canada. The deadline for that is August the 29th. So we do have several open registration for these activities. And then there's a notice in the chat that we'll need to read. But yeah, that's where we are. Oh, we have a few more. Taiwan consumer-oriented outbound mission to Taipei and Kaohsiung is deadline is August 31st. There's a Mexico outbound train mission. The deadline is September the 26th. Specialty food inbound to Colorado and Idaho. Deadline of October the 10th. And then the Europe inbound mission to Colorado and New Mexico, also with a deadline of October the 10th. So a lot of activities and a lot of opportunities.
Nelda, just noting that Elisa mentioned the China Pet Food International Fair outbound mission, the deadline's extended to July 10.
Okay, that's
on this page here.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Look, obviously, Wasata provides trade leads that come through that are designed to share with the entirety of the group items that may be needed by an importer. So we've been talking about China, and probably the questions for Ian. Do we have any type of listings of importers, what they import, what categories they import? So just as an example, if I'm in the confection business, would there be a list of importers that do confection? Or if I'm in nutritional bars, is there a list of importers that do nutritional bars?
Well, I would say, how should I say this? We have an internal list of buyers within different categories. But as far as sharing, I'm not sure how that works. But we would be happy to connect you with any potential buyers if you're part of a USADA trade show or trade mission. I guess that's how I would respond.
Okay.
I also wanted to note that my colleague Jack responded to Jordan's question about organic labeling. So that's been answered there. Sean Hester, a couple questions and comments that might be easier to mention on mic if possible. Go ahead.
Yes. The first thing is our experience in sending samples to China is that the maximum shipment size is 5 kilograms. And then anything over 5 kilograms, even an ounce, it'll be considered a commercial shipment. So anything that would typically require health permits, that type of documentation, it may have changed, but if it is, it may still be the same. But our experience is that you got to make sure that your sample shipment is below 5 kilograms. Because if it's not, they'll keep it and they will reject it, and you will not get it shipped to your potential customer. That's the first thing. The second thing is we've done business with Alibaba, with Tmall, and have a major e-commerce campaign. China by far has the most developed e-commerce market in the world, and with that, you have to make sure that any kind of e-commerce business, that it's as few clicks as possible to get to your product purchase page. If we had a campaign with an ad agency in Shanghai, the account manager made a mistake and did not have a registration, $400 registration for a Weibo account. So they weren't able to immediately click. We got a refund and did it over, but we had a key opinion leader, campaign where we had almost 4 million views. But you've got to make sure that since they don't have Google, you need to have the Weibo connection, or otherwise your consumer is stuck. And then the last thing I have is two more things. One, the agricultural trade offices in Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou are great at providing lists and helping vet distributors and importers. But again, as Ian said, you really got to ask a lot of questions, because everyone says they've got distribution everywhere. But depending on what the margins are, you can tell, are they direct distribution, or are they using a sub-distributor somewhere else that they have to pay yet another margin? Mm-hmm. And the last thing I have is actually a question for Ian. Ian, one of the biggest challenges we've had, I mean, I've met in the past with every retail account in China except for two in person, is that we'll get to a certain point and then the category managers change to another category. And that's been our biggest kiss of death, is with Alibaba, with Walmart, with Sam's Club, other retailers. How do you work around that? Because that seems like, to me, it's been our absolute biggest challenge is China. We'll get a contract, we'll get an agreement, firm a contract, we're ready to go, ready to sign, and then the category managers transfer to detergents or something else.
Yeah, that is unfortunately just the environment in China, especially the past couple of years. There's just been so many turnarounds as far as staffing is concerned. So I've talked to quite a few people about that, but it seems like all I can say is that's just part of doing business in China for now. There's not really a way to go around bypassing that sort of situation. So I guess involving as many people from that particular company as possible, so you cover as many people who are aware of what's happening. then if one person leaves, then maybe there's another backup person that is aware of what's happening and can try and push that deal through. I would say that might be the way.
Okay. And then the last thing I have to mention for any California companies, the state of California has an ICEP grant program for exporting products that they do cover intellectual property. So for any California companies, it's worth applying. We've used it for helping cover the expense of trademark registration in different markets. And that's it.
Sean, if I may, as a follow-up to your comment or challenge with dealing with retail staff change, that's just, I found that working in programs globally with retailers. And I've learned over time that in meetings, there's usually more than just one particular buyer or kind of account lead or department head that you're meeting with. And I've learned over time to collect the names from whoever you're having those meetings, whether they're virtual or in person. And like Ian was saying, kind of keep everybody in the loop. But usually there's at least one person that'll kind of continue on with a new person in the support role, and they sometimes move into that buyer role. And just to keep in mind, and everyone else in the room, because even if that head buyer moves on, there's usually someone else that is continuing on. So not sure if that's helpful, but I've experienced that, and I've been trying personally to do a better job of keeping everyone else their contact information as time goes on.
It just seems like it's really become it's China specific on this.
Okay.
And you'll have, we've tried to do the same, that what you suggest. We've had whole departments that have been transferred, and then so we're just trying to always ask, if we meet with a buyer, can we meet with your boss?
Yeah.
Because we'll literally get to a $20 million contract, get it, letter of intent, we're ready to sign, place orders, and then the person's gone. And if you don't have that next higher up, you're starting from scratch all over again.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Just as a follow-up before I hand it back to Nelda for closing, I wanted to reiterate our offer for one-on-one consultations with businesses, and we can, especially if you provide your specific products or market situation, we can do a little research ahead of time and have those conversations on a one-on-one basis. So that information will be distributed with Nelda in addition to the survey.